Today I have Isidra Mencos, who is an author of the book Promenade of Desire, which is a Barcelona memoir. Isidra and I have known each other for almost 2 decades. And she is going to tell us a little bit about why she wrote the book, who it's for, and why you should read it.
Hola, Lorraine. It's so nice to be here with you. So why did I write this book? Well, let me tell you. Unless you absolutely need to write your own story, I don't advise writing memoir because it's very hard. You have to face a lot of fears about who you're going to hurt, who you're not going to hurt, and so on. However, I did have a burning desire to write this book because I wanted to understand why I had been so self-destructive in my 20s, why I had too many lovers, too much alcohol, too much drama, and if that was related just with my own upbringing or if it had something to do with the wider context. I grew up in a dictatorship in Spain, like you did, and I was 17 when the dictator died and the country transitioned to democracy. That took 2 or 3 years, but the cultural and the sexual revolution happened overnight. So we went from a place where we had been raised to be repressed Catholic virgins to all of a sudden becoming these seductive, empowered young women who it was exhilarating but at the same time confusing. We didn't have a role model for how to be free, how to be lustful, how to search for love in a healthy way. So along the way, while I learned all of those things, there was, as I said before, a lot of drama, a lot of self-destruction, but also a lot of learning. And I needed to explain that journey.
Well, I have to say that when I read the book, Isidra and I have a very small age difference, but when you're younger, it shows more. I was 12 when Franco died, but I lived in Spain at the time as well, and my youth was in Spain as well. So the too much alcohol, the promiscuity maybe wasn't as much, I want to say, but it gave me, it gave me the permission to realize, oh, that's why I was this way or that way, or that's why, like my sister and I would play sexual games with our dolls, and we thought it was wrong. We didn't have social media. We didn't have other people explaining what was, as you just said, we didn't have role models. My grandmother was the closest thing I had as a role model, and she was definitely not the best thing and the best person to give me advice on sex. Well, drugs, I don't know if that would have been any good advice from her. But in that way, I felt, oh, wow, Isidra just made me realize I was pretty normal in the sense that all of us have a coming of age story. All of us feel inadequate growing up, and you definitely explained it perfectly in the pages. Why would somebody who was raised in the United States, for example, want to read this?
That's a good question. I have found that both women that are around our age, baby boomers, relate very much to my experience because they went through something similar, right? They went from a very conservative society in the 50s to all of a sudden going through the civil rights, to the women liberation movement, free love, hippie era, etc. So in Spain, it was different because it was caused by the dictatorship and then moving to democracy, but it was a similar movement from repression to liberation and what that all entailed, especially for women. Then what I have discovered is that young women that are between 18 to 28 absolutely love the book because they are living it right now. I mean, who hasn't had confusing 20s?
Oh, gosh.
Who hasn't felt lost in their 20s, not knowing what is my career gonna really be? What do I really want from life? I'm having all of these hookups, but I'm not really satisfied with them. Why is that? What is it that I really want? What do I want sexually? All of those things you are discovering in your 20s. So I think that women that are younger are relating to it because they feel like, and I've had several tell me, oh my God, that just happened to me, last week. Or I had this 18-year-old who wrote me this beautiful letter saying, that she felt so inspired by this book because I was not perfect in the book, and she wasn't perfect either. And I was like, she got it. I mean, that was one of the main messages in the book, that we are not perfect. We all make mistakes. People hurt us. We hurt people. And that's because we're human. You know, we can never be perfect. So I've noticed that both women that are 50 plus and the younger women relate to the book a lot. And then what I've also noticed is that people who like history or who are interested in Barcelona or in Spain, they relate to it because it's a love letter to Barcelona. And throughout the book, you have a parallel between my story and the history of the country and this evolution. So I've had a lot of people tell me, oh my God, I learned so much about Spain. I didn't know all of those things. And I loved it, you know. And I believe that because it talks about the dangers of dictatorship and how it goes into every corner of your life, is very relevant today for Americans, but just in general, where we are seeing this evolution from democracy towards authoritarianism, a lot of the rise of the very right-wing authoritarian fascist parties and so on. That's happening all over the world, and in America we've seen democracy threatened. So I think this book is a bit of a wake-up call, because you know, Americans haven't lived a dictatorship, so I don't think they really understand how deeply it gets entrenched into your life, how deeply it touches everything. In Spain, for example, and you know that, it was repression politically, obviously, but also linguistically. There were languages that were forbidden.
Catalan.
It was religiously. Religions that were not the Catholic religion for many years couldn't have public services. They couldn't go to a synagogue, you know, for some years in the dictatorship. Sexually, you know, if they caught you doing a French kiss in the street, you could go to jail for indecent behavior. So when there is an authoritarian regime, it goes everywhere into your life. And I really wanted to bring that message to today, where I think is very relevant.
I think that's absolutely true. Like, when I tell people that my grandfather fought in the Spanish Civil War, sometimes in the United States people say, wait, there was a civil war? I'm like, yes, there was. And there were concentration camps. My grandfather was in one of Franco's concentration camps, and that affected my grandmother, but it also affected why my father, who was Spanish, came here to the United States and at 17 and made a new life here and all this. So I feel that it is a very, very relevant book. I definitely found myself in it just because we share the, you know, bicultural aspect of it. We share that we have lived in Spain, but then we came to the United States when we were older. And one thing that I would love you to tell whoever watches this is, what would you recommend to somebody who wants to write their memoir?
Well, you know, something that you hear a lot is that write it as if no one is going to read it. And that is true. If you really want to go to the deepest, deepest truth in your life, you cannot be led by fear. You have to be fearless in writing your story. And yes, it's true that it may ruffle some feathers in your family or people that were in your past. You cannot write a revenge memoir. That nobody's going to want to read that. It's going to be bitter. It's not going to be something that people want to read. Plus, you know, part of writing your story from a more compassionate point of view is that it really helps you understand why people acted the way they acted. So I would say be very fearless, write your honest truth, realize that you have a right to tell your story. So I would start with that. And then memoir is different from biography. You don't want to tell everything about your life. You want to decide what is your main theme or themes, and you want to choose and pick from your life the things that the stories and the anecdotes that reflect those themes. Because if you were to write absolutely everything, you would have a boring 800 pages book, and you don't want that.
You were really good at that because it starts when you're young, you're in Spain, and it goes back to your youth, through your childhood, and then it ends when you arrive in the United States, which I thought was perfect. I'm not going to ask you where people can find the book because it can be found wherever books are sold.
Right.
So Promenade of Desire by Isidra Mencos on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, her website isidramencos.com, or anywhere where any books are sold. So thank you so much for being with me.
My pleasure.